Hello, thank you so much, Rowan and Annette. So thank you for joining me. We're going to talk today about how accelerating your month-end close and compressing those actual cycles can be helpful in Planful. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Pamela. I'm a solutions consultant with Planful. I've been with Planful for about 7.5 years, and prior to that, I spent another 12 years at another vendor. But at heart, I'm really an accounting and finance person. So I started my career in the field before finding enabling technology, and I'm happy to spend some time with you today just talking about the things that we've learned as a company, how we can help you and your group accelerate your actual process. So what we'll do is we'll talk about 3 different topics today. We're making the assumption that there will be a couple of different types of people joining the call. Some of you will be completely new to Planful, and I'll make sure we give you a nice introduction to Planful. Some of you will be using Planful currently, maybe from the FP&A and reporting perspective, but are not leveraging the consolidation area of the application. And some of you are actively using the platform and or using consolidations, but maybe not using it to its fullest extent. Maybe there's some new stuff you can leverage that will help you. So let's get right into it. So first of all, let's talk about how Planful supports that continuous planning process. And what we're really talking about is when you look at the platform, there are a number of different functional areas that support the entire office of the CFO. What we want to do is, assuming you're maybe using dashboards and reporting, and maybe you're doing some planning and forecasting in the application, we also want to bring into the fold the actuals and how we can help with that consolidation activity. So let's take a look at some software today. I'm just going to toggle over to my application, and let's start first of all by addressing folks who are maybe brand new to Planful. So when you look at Planful, we are in live software right now. And what I'll do is I'll just orient you a little bit to our application before we start diving in. But you'll notice, for example, when I mouse down the left-hand side of the screen, we're doing everything you need to do to support the Office of the CFO in one unified platform. So you'll notice, for example, dynamic planning, like top-down planning and what-if scenarios, for example. They're living in the exact same platform as our structured planning. So those bottoms-up detailed plans that are maybe very collaborative. And those live right next to the reporting and all the analytics. And look at that. Our consolidation activity is also part of the entire process. The notion becomes that if we accelerate and compress the cycle times of getting our actual information, what we do is we empower our business, right? The sooner we have good information and reliable information, the quicker we can make better decisions. And that's really what accelerating actuals is all about. So let's start first by talking a little bit about the data. So what we encourage you to do at Planful is bring the data into Planful that you need, not just for planning and forecasting, but also from an actual standpoint. So then it becomes very easy for you to share with the decision makers in your organization stuff like not just trial balance information, but also maybe some non-financial metrics. Like you notice in my dashboard, I happen to be looking at, for example, revenue with a spark line of units. I have some key metrics that we're tracking, like our average selling price. Now those values, those KPIs can either be imported from the system or even calculated within Planful. Again, just supporting that decision-making process. So when we think about consolidations, I'm going to switch views here and I'm going to take a look at a report. A lot of times when we think about consolidations, we think about a view that kind of sort of looks like this, right? I'm consolidating entities running across the top of a report. We are absolutely talking about that, right? We definitely want to be able to get you to this consolidated view. When you're doing that stuff in Excel, it's really, you're spending a lot of time on low value activity. We want to switch the focus, right? So all your attention can be on those high value assets, really supporting the growth of the business. So how do we do that? So I'm going to switch views again. So I'm going to illustrate a lot of the concepts that we're talking about through reporting, because that's how it's really being exposed to your community. So if you look, for example, so my actuals are in. We've accelerated the process. My actuals are stacked right against my plan or my forecast or maybe even a what-if scenario. So I have nice comparative analysis. But even beyond that, let's kind of just back up a little bit. If you notice, for example, when I'm looking at my actuals, let's take a look at this. So this happens to be a summary value at gross sales. When I pop this report open, because remember, I have live self-service reporting serving the data from the database up into my reports and analytic views. I can drill down and see at the trial balance or the common chart of accounts, I can see the values here. But moreover, let's say you're an org that has many trial balances. Maybe you're doing lots of acquisitions. If you're taking time to map that data and do currency translation in an Excel workbook, we definitely can save you some time here. Let me go ahead and drill open this sales number. So, right, this is my trial balance number. This is as low as it went in my common chart of accounts in Planful. But what's this number about? So I'm just going to select that data point. That's what that little finger tells me. We'll come back to this view, but I'm going to switch over to this translations tab, because what I can see here is how my data was translated as it came into Planful. So what you have at Planful is this becomes a repeatable process. You'll create a translation mapping that is in existence for each of your data sources. And what that allows any user with security access to that data point is to see how that data was mapped as it came into the common chart of accounts. For example, let's pretend I did an acquisition and maybe my main ERP is SAP, but I just did an acquisition of somebody that's on, I don't know, NetSuite, right? Their chart of accounts, their data is not going to be shaped the same as mine. And we're going to spend a lot of time, if we're doing this in Excel, trying to massage that data so that we can get like-for-like comparisons and we can normalize the data. Here, what I've done, and I'll just drag this closer a little bit so you can see a little better what I'm talking about, is within Planful, I have that common chart of accounts where I have said, for example, this account 40,000 is sales. And when my information, I'm just going to bring your attention all the way over here to this segment 2, this is coming from NetSuite. In NetSuite, we call this account 40,100. And all I did was I ran that data through the mapping table. Now, the other really nice thing is you'll notice I loaded in local currency. I'm letting the system use system-delivered functionality to do the currency translation for me too. So all of that drudgery in Excel, all that error-prone activity is all gone. We're running this through the mapping table on an automatic process. Currency conversion is happening as the data loads. And really, this is giving you more time. You're going to become that strategic advisor to the business. That's our goal. Now, remember, we're trying to get to that analytic view, but we're also, if we're going to keep informing the business, we're going right back to that continuous planning cycle, because now not only are my actuals available for that actual versus budget management style report, I can also roll my actual data right into a forecast. So we have the ability to constantly keep adjusting the organization, keep informing the business, and let the business keep making better decisions and roll that right into a forecast. In this case, we're looking at that continuous planning process in a forecast. So let me go back to my PowerPoint. And let's now talk to those folks who are maybe currently using the application to do their consolidation processes. And are there different ways that we can help you be even more efficient with that? Maybe it was something that you wasn't a concern when you originally implemented, or maybe it's new functionality that you haven't taken advantage of yet. So how can we help you with that? So some of the underutilized, I'll say, areas within the application that we see on a regular basis is dynamic journal entries. How can dynamic journal entries help you automate what you're doing on a regular basis? How can that actually reduce risk and make everything more accurate? Are you leveraging transactional detail, right? Being better able to find information more easily within the application. I'll show you an example of that. And then the last little icon here, I just want to do a little quick commercial, little plug for one of my brethren. Make sure if you're interested in supporting CTA by account that you check out Ben Page's session on the flow dimension. So the flow dimension is new. Ben's session is called Managing Cash Flow with Clarity and Certainty. Make sure you attend that if that's important to you. For now, let's go back to the application. And let's go back to, remember when I pulled open this report and I said, don't worry about that tab, I'll come back to it? Let's come back to it. So I'm going to just switch my view from that translation. So remember, I drilled down on that data point. I'm just going to go back to the transactions. What transaction detail gives you, you as a customer will decide what kind of detail you want to load to Planful. Remember, we never charge you for the data. Right? So load what you need to do good analysis, and moreover, empower your managers with a single click stream to answer their own questions without having to go back to accounting or finance for answers. What you see in front of you is in my application, I have loaded subledger information for the sales journal. And so my end users, by having access to the application and specific data points, can now, in this case, see all of the transactions that are making up that $38 million. They also, without ever having to dump to Excel or massage data or again go back to accounting or finance, can even filter the data, right? This is a lot of information. You're overwhelming me, right? I can at any time as a user select this little filter button and then very easily start to filter on the data saying, no, just give me certain products or certain entities or cost centers, just working with the data as it exists. The other thing that I want to talk a little bit about, let me just switch back over to this tab. Another area besides transactional detail where customers gain some efficiencies is with dynamic journal entries. So let me switch over to our consolidation area. Oh, by the way, if you are a user of the system, you'll notice there have been some enhancements even in how we monitor the process, so I can easily monitor what's going on. There's no additional effort here. This is just me being able to see where different parts of the org are in the close process, again, accelerating that process. But the real reason we came here was to talk about dynamic journals. So I'm just going to go to the dynamic journal area. And notice I have a few here. So a couple that just pop right to the top of my head. What if you have a really complex structure in your ERP? Rather than trying to map that and dice it up and slice it up within an ERP system or Excel, use a dynamic journal entry to actually reclass that information and let the system do it for you, right? We get rid of the drudgery, we get rid of the manual process. Another area that's near and dear to my heart is allocations. If you're doing allocations in Excel, essentially just about every allocation I can think of is a bunch of third grade math, right? Take the base, divide it by this, gives me my percentage, multiply it back. We can all do third grade math. The problem becomes in doing it over and over and over again. Every time our data point changes, whether it's a new month or a new quarter, or maybe we had a late journal entry made, we don't want to keep doing that process over and over again. So you can use the system to do allocations. I'm going to give you a little twofer here for my finance folks. So not only can I do it in the actual side of the house, I can also do it on the budget side of the house. So let me just switch views real quickly, and I'll show you how it works. So what a dynamic journal entry means is I have data in my database, and I'm going to use it to create a journal entry. In this case, I'm doing a corporate allocation where I'm doing corporate overhead costs. Well, I've already pulled that information in, or I've planned it. Works the same on the planning side of the house as it does on the actual side. So that data is in the database. Let me just access it and pull it forward. And in this case, I want to allocate using headcount as my basis. Headcount's already in there too. We've planned our headcount and or we've pulled in the actual headcount. So here's my headcount information that's living in my database. And now we're going to do a bunch of third grade math. This divided by this equals my relative percentage, multiply it by the total to give me the amount I'm going to post back, and then let me zero out the basis. Super simple. I just rerun this calculation when the data is new. And oh, by the way, for those of you who are new to Planful and how we do things here, notice when I bring your attention to that formula bar, we leverage Excel syntax when we write calculations here. So no need to learn proprietary language, no need to be dependent on technical resources. And then the third and final area I'll touch on today is even just something as simple as account review when you're in mid-consolidation. So let me go back to my reports and I'll show you an example. I'll close this report down and I'll show you an example of, you know what, I've pulled my trial balance information. Maybe it's day 1 or day 2 of the close, right? Everything isn't closed yet, but even now I can start reviewing my information, right? Because we're always trying to run them through filters. So in this case, I'm looking at the numbers that are making up my sales journal. And I, in this case, chose to compare it against my previous plan and run up a variance. So I can run it through a heat map and quickly start being alerted to areas that maybe need a little more of my attention. Again, with the notion we're just going to keep accelerating that process. We want to keep our foot on the gas. So now let's talk a little bit more about some other items that maybe you're not taking full advantage of the application. You have it. Just use it, right? So I call this low-hanging fruit. So a couple of areas that we think about, and I'll actually work the slide backwards. So some additional reporting options that maybe have come out in the last year or so that you're not taking advantage of. Let's just talk about those quickly. Leveraging the system to alternate reporting styles, as well as direct connectivity to the database with the Microsoft Office products and how that could benefit you. So again, toggling back to the application, let's start, kind of with the end in mind. So let me start with talking about alternate reporting structures, right? So here I happen to be looking at a report where I'm looking at my IFRS adjustments. How does that all come about? So I'm going to toggle back to an administrative area of the application. If you're new to Planful, don't be afraid. This is an area that if you don't have security access to it, you would not be allowed to go here. For those of you who know Planful and been using Planful, this will look like a very familiar area because you have one point of maintenance. in the application for the entire platform. Right, so here I am in my hierarchy manager. If I look at the application itself, here's my main entity rollup. These, of course, would be the dimensions available to you from your database. They will be unique to every organization. These are the ones in mine. When I look at my entity dimension, for example, notice I have my main rollup, and as I kind of pop it open, you'll notice it's kind of my geographic rollup, basically a legal entity rollup. But right in the same database, I can also have alternate rollups, like a dated hierarchy or maybe a management view. Maintain it here so you don't have to keep running through it in Excel and just creating more work for yourselves. Leverage this. The other area that gives you even more reporting capabilities and the ability to slice and dice that data in different ways without actually touching the data, I'll just select one of these entities, is reporting attributes. So now I'm all the way at the lowest level. Company number 1 is a base level entity for me in my application. And I'm just going to take this little slider bar and slide it down to the bottom. So notice here, above and beyond my alternate hierarchies, I've used this area called user-defined attributes. And I have one for percentage ownership and line of business. Why do we care about this? Because we don't want to have to massage the data and create all these lookup tables in Excel every single time somebody comes to me and asks to see the business in a slightly different way. Now, how does this look? So I'm going to go back to that report we were just looking at. So this is an example of using this IFRS rollup. I'm going to pop open my report by selecting this little double-sided arrow. And you can see that when I created this report, I chose to put entity on the page. Well, what if I want to leverage one of those alternate hierarchies? I'll just select this object, and you'll see it automatically brings up for me my hierarchy. This should look familiar, as well as alternate reporting structures. Right? So that's one way I could leverage it. The other way I can leverage this, I'm just going to pull it off the page so you can see what I'm talking about. And notice when I select entity, there's a little arrow here that allows me to also access those attributes. So just different ways to leverage the database just to make your life easier. It also, more importantly, makes your reporting more accurate because I don't accidentally forget to include something in my range when I'm doing that lookup or whatever. So that's one way. And then the final area that I wanted to touch on is did you know, this is a little bit of did you know, if you're a current user of Planful, that you have full access to every single data point in the database leveraging desktop Excel. So I'm going to toggle over to a blank Excel workbook, and you'll notice in the ribbon, and you'll notice in the ribbon of PowerPoint and Word as well, I happen to be in Excel, Spotlight. What Spotlight means is this is your window, this is your connection from the database to any of the Microsoft Office products. And what that allows me to do is analyze my data with speed of thought clicking, right? Access to that data. Let me show you a quick example. So here I've done a pull of my database. I've pulled my data. I'm looking at actual data for the entire year. In this case, I'm looking at my net operating income. Well, gee, what are the accounts that make up net operating income? I simply double select that point and we go down to the next level. What if I want to see what's going on with operating expenses only? Here, let me do a quick keep only. So what you see me doing is having that dialogue with the database. Hey, I want more detail on operating expenses. And you can select from the little drop-down box if you want a onesie twosies. Or I prefer to be efficient or lazy, depending on how you define me. Let me just, again, double select. And what I'd really like to do is an actual versus budget comparison. Well, you know what? Control C, Control V, you can type it in, or if you're like me and don't trust your typing capabilities, you might want to select from the drop-down box. So maybe I want to compare those actual values, not to the annual operating plan anymore, maybe to that forecast that we've been updating. Let me go ahead and select that value and go get my data. So super easy for me now to get at my data using that familiar interface for me as a finance user or an accounting professional. I like working with my data in Excel. So it creates nice continuity for you. Data stays safe. I decide what I want it to look like. So I hope that was helpful for you as you're thinking about Planful and as you're going through the tour. Really, the whole idea is we want to accelerate those actuals so that information becomes available sooner, better decision support, really allowing you to partner with your business as they grow. You really earn a seat at the table as an accounting or finance professional when you're helping to identify areas of opportunity or risk in the organization. So thank you for your time, and now back to Rowan and Annette.